Just gonna lock it up. Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Natividad, and I'm the president of the Filipino-Canadian Lawyers Network, Réseau des Avocats Filipino-Canadiens. And during this program, I'm just going to refer to it as FCLN. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are very pleased to welcome all of you to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month. And as I said, I am based in Ottawa, which is on the unceded ancestral lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe nations. We thank them for sharing these lands with us and for contributing to the history and cultural arts and so forth of Canada. We encourage everyone to learn more about Indigenous history and Indigenous culture. So tonight is a big night for us. Congratulations to everyone for Filipino Heritage Month. We have to give each other a congratulatory pat in the back. There are two celebrations tonight. The first is Filipino.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
So if people could please mute themselves as they arrive. As I was saying, we have two celebrations tonight. The first is Filipino Heritage Month with our three special guests who are the first Filipino-Canadian justices in the Canadian judiciary. The second celebration is the first anniversary of FCLN. So the organization was actually launched last year on June 1. And our vision was to create and connect all Filipino Canadians across Canada and to create a platform for them so that they could network with each other, share experiences, refer clients to each other, and all together be part of this wonderful network. Since our launch, we have initiated and participated in many activities. The one that I really particularly enjoy is the interviews that we are doing as part of the Osgood Society historical program, where we interview Filipino Canadian lawyers with their consent and justices as well. And we learn about their journey in the legal profession. It is a way of recording the stories and the beginnings of Filipino Canadian lawyers in Canada. The transcripts and the recordings will be archived in Archives Ontario, and the public can actually view it at their pleasure. So instead of a book, we have the digital age of the recordings. Our next initiative was to start a legal series, and we did that from the beginning. And the legal series served many purposes. It served to profile the lawyers that are members of FCLN or would be members. It profiles their practice, and it shares their experiences in their practice to other Filipino Canadian lawyers. So in that respect, it was very useful, and it was a way of creating a network and getting them to know that there's this network that is available to them. Our third initiative was to partner with Pro Bono Ontario, where we can assist Canadians who cannot afford a lawyer, and not necessarily Filipino Canadians, but generally Canadians in general. So we've done that, and we continue to do it throughout our practice. We've also joined with equity seeking organizations. The one that we're focusing on for Filipino Canadian lawyers or Filipinos coming to Canada to be accredited in the various provincial bars is the FCLN-RAPC Networks Association. And it's a group of equality-seeking legal professionals and stakeholders who are committed to improving the experience of internationally trained lawyers in their exploration for a new legal career in Canada, and their licensing and the various paths that they will take. So as I said, we're focusing on Filipino Canadian lawyers, but if anyone, of course, approaches us, we will, of course, assist them to the best that we can. We also joined with RODA, which is the Roundtable of Legal Diversity Association. And that organization promotes dialogue and initiatives relating to the advancement of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in the legal profession, in the judiciary, and within the broader legal community. Our AGM is this June, and in June, what we will be doing is also launching our mentoring program. And we want mentors who would like to mentor other lawyers, newly called the bars, paralegals, law students, and also mentees. And, mentees should not be shy of asking us or asking the network that they want to be mentored, because that is really a way of advancing in your career or in your life in general. So those are the initiatives that have been undertaken by FCLN. I would now like to introduce to you the board of directors. We are a hands-on organization. We're a small staff, small board, and we hope to include more Filipino Canadians across Canada at our AGM in June. So apart from myself as president of the organization, I'd like to introduce Rachel Sachs of Sachs Law. Rachel specializes in elder law, states law, and also real estate. Our secretary is Rochelle Castaneda. Rochelle is an employment lawyer with Zubas Law. And our treasurer is Barbara Del Dios. Barbara is corporate counsel for the Canadian Dental Services Corporation. And Barbara is actually navigating us through this Zoom webinar. So she's our tech person for the night. Our next board officer is Lou Johnson Dangzalen. Lou is our membership and outreach chair, and he specializes in immigration law at LJD Law. Next is Karina Delfrat. She is our governance and compliance officer, and she's the head of legal at across Canada for the Monde Inc. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is your entire board. And as I said, we hope to have more Filipino Canadian lawyers across Canada represented in our board at our June AGM. So the next part of our program is what all of you have been waiting for, which is a dialogue and conversation with the three justices who are of Filipino ethnicity who have been appointed to the Canadian judiciary. And we're so pleased and so honored that they're taking time to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month with us tonight. And the first justice that I would like to recognize is Steve Carosa. Steve A. Carosa is a justice of the Court of Appeal of Ontario. Prior to his appointment, he has actually the distinction of having been appointed to all levels of the Ontario courts. So he started with his appointment as a justice with the Ontario Court of Justice in 2009. Secondly, he was appointed to the Superior Court of Justice in Brampton in 2013. And then thirdly, to the Ontario Court of Appeal of Ontario on April 5, 2020. Justice Carosa was born in Belleville, Ontario. He's actually Canadian born, but his parents are from the Philippines, and they immigrated to Canada to give their children a better future and a better life. Prior to Justice Carosa being in the judiciary, he also worked with Legal Aid Ontario, but prior to his appointments, he was senior counsel with the Department of Justice and the Public Prosecution Service of Canada, specializing in criminal law, or that is his main area. In that vein, he co-authored a book, Sentencing Drug Offenders, with the Honorable Simon Armstrong of the Ontario Court of Justice. Our next justice, also of the Court of Appeal, is Justice Bernette Ho. Welcome. So Justice Bernette Ho is also a Court of Appeal justice, but of the Alberta Court, and she was appointed to that court last August. Prior to her appointment, Justice Ho was a member of the Court of the Queen's Bench of Alberta, based in Calgary in 2008. And prior to being appointed to the judiciary, Justice Ho spent 23 years with McLeod Dixon, now known as the Northern Rose Fulbright Canada LLP. She practiced regulatory matters, including gas, electricity, and oil, also employment, arbitration, administration law, and commercial litigation. Justice Ho came to Canada when she was only 6 months old. Again, her parents are from the Philippines, and they wanted, just like Justice Carosa's parents, a better life for their children. So both Justice Ho and Justice Carosa credit their parents for the value of hard work and the importance of family. Our next justice is Justice Gail Gatchalian, and she is of the Nova Scotia Court, Supreme Court of Nova Scotia. She was appointed last year in April. Prior to her appointment, Justice Gatchalian was also in private practice. She was a partner at Pink Larkin Lawyers in Halifax, where she practiced labor law, employment, human rights, and constitutional law for 22 years. She received her Queen's Counsel designation in 2018. Justice Gatchalian was very active with the Canadian Bar Association, firstly as one of its former presidents and chairing various committees and sections of the CBA as we know it. She also chaired the Nova Scotia Human Rights Board of Inquiry. Justice Gatchalian is of mixed Filipino and Scottish-Irish descent. Her father is a Filipino and her mother was Irish-Scottish from Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, which is why she returned there after she articled and studied in Toronto. So those are our three wonderful justices. And now the agenda will be, the board will be posting questions to the three justices. They will then respond each of the questions, and each of the questions will be posed by different members of the board. So I will ask the first question to our justices. And my question is, is it important to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month? What is its significance to you? So Justice Carosa, if you would like to lead us.
Sure. Before I answer, first of all, thanks very much, Alicia and the FCLN for putting this together. I want to congratulate my two colleagues, Justice Ho and Justice Gatchalian, on their historic appointments. It's just a really remarkable thing that we're having a conference with the three of us, and I am very much looking forward to seeing them and meeting them in person at some point. And I want to congratulate FCLN on your first anniversary. You're doing really important work, and I think it's an amazing testament to everyone here. So from my perspective, do I think it's important to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month? Absolutely. We're a country that I think is built on diversity. We promote diversity. We celebrate the uniqueness of each person. And with respect to Filipinos, I think there's a lot to celebrate. And from my perspective, number one, it's important, but it also has significance to me on a personal level. As you mentioned, I was born in Canada, but my parents immigrated from the Philippines. So the idea that we would celebrate Filipino Heritage Month, the significance to me is I think of my parents typically, and I actually I was actually sworn in a couple of weeks ago, believe it or not, even though I was appointed in April 2020. I was a COVID appointment, so they put off my swearing in until a couple of weeks ago. And in that speech, I said, we're celebrating Filipino Canadian Heritage Month. We're celebrating Asian Heritage Month in May. My parents won't make any of the lists that you see that are sort of put out there, but for me, they're worth celebrating. And this sort of Heritage Month makes me think of my parents and all the sacrifices that they made, leaving a country at the age of 19 or 20 and coming into an absolutely foreign country, and then you know, with the view that they were going to ensure that their kids had a, you know, a really great opportunity. So I'm thankful to them, and that's what it symbolizes for me. And I absolutely, you know, welcome the idea that we are celebrating Filipino Heritage Month in June.
Thank you. Justice Ho?
I mean, I would echo what Justice Carroza said. I don't have a whole lot more to add. And I, again, like him, I thank all of you for the kind invitation and for taking time out of your schedule to listen to us. It is absolutely important to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month in Canada. And you know, because my family emigrated here when I was only 6 months old, what I have found celebrating Heritage Month has provided to me is an opportunity to learn about what others of Filipino heritage are doing in the community, because they're being celebrated in different ways. And so I've learned about people who now have their own design companies, or who have their own clothing, you know, companies that you can then sort of network through and try and promote their businesses. Of course, the food. Food is very important to our culture, and I'm all about celebrating Filipino food, let me tell you. You know, there was a big at my Queen's Bench celebration. I made sure that we served quite a bit of Filipino food, and it was very well received. And a lot of my colleagues were asking about pancit, and were asking about Silvanas, and were asking about all of that. So it was a tremendous opportunity to share that with them. And so I think Heritage Month provides us with an opportunity to celebrate the Filipino heritage and share with others, even outside of our community, everything that Filipino culture has to offer.
Thank you. Justice Gatchalian?
Thank you, and thank you as well for inviting me to your celebration. I'm greatly honored and very grateful for that. I totally agree with the comments of Justices Carroza and Ho, and maybe just expanding on it a little bit. I think it's especially important for children and young people of Filipino descent to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month, to celebrate their history and their culture, and to develop and maintain pride in who they are and the resilience that they'll need to thrive and succeed. Celebrating Filipino heritage also gives us opportunities like this one for members of the Filipino community to celebrate their successes, and also to see themselves reflected in our important democratic institutions. From the perspective of a judge, I think that events like these, when we get to interact with the community outside the courtroom, gives us very helpful information and interactions for our own growth and learning. And as a final comment, I would say that this kind of outreach is just one step, but an important step towards the very important goal of increasing representation of diverse perspectives on the bench. If members of the Filipino community see themselves reflected on the bench, they may think about becoming lawyers or eventually becoming judges, and having more diverse perspectives in the judiciary enhances the confidence of people generally in the administration of justice. So important for many reasons.
Thank you for that. So I'll turn it over to Rachel Sachs.
Thank you, Justices, for those warm and very open answers to Alicia's question. My question goes right to the heart of why you do what you do. So I would love to know, I would love if you could share why you became judges and what prompted you to apply for the bench in your community. Maybe we'll start with Justice Ho.
So I worked at a fairly large firm and practiced generally with a commercial litigation background, and I did some other work in the energy regulatory area. And while I very much enjoyed the work that I did, I had some terrific clients that I was working with and had a very nice practice. I felt somewhat unfulfilled from a community perspective. I always made sure that I did some pro bono work and I did a lot of volunteer work outside of my work at the firm, but it still felt to me as though something was missing. And one of my partners, we have a fairly long legacy at the firm, or had a fairly long legacy at the firm, of partners being appointed to the bench. And when someone that I was working quite closely with was appointed, that's what sort of had me thinking, well, maybe this is the route that I should pursue in terms of trying to give back to the community and really thank and take a step into the role of public service and thank Canada for everything that they have given my family, because I am the youngest of 5. And all of my siblings have worked very hard here in Canada and have been given tremendous opportunities and have all done very well in their own fields. I'm the only one who's a lawyer or who became a lawyer and then applied to the bench. And so for me, it was a step towards hopefully providing service to the community. And I was fortunate enough to be applying at a time when, as Justice Gatchalian referenced, you know, the importance of having diversity on the bench was one that was particularly recognized at the time that I applied. And so I was fortunate enough to be appointed and have the privilege of serving in this capacity.
Wonderful. Justice Gatchalian?
For me, it really wasn't something I thought of until quite late into my career. It wasn't a decision I came to quickly. It took some time. I practiced in a very niche area for 22 years. I knew my craft pretty well. I did love my work and my clients, but I think there were a few factors that fed into my decision to apply. I began to think about whether or not I could, echoing a bit the comments of Justice Ho, whether or not I could contribute to society in another way using the skills and experience I had gained in my practice. I had also been to and organized several events like this one, where I was able to hear from or assist in organizing panels of judges to speak to lawyers, never thinking that I wanted to apply to the bench, but hearing over and over about the work of a judge, it started to appeal to me. It sounded very challenging and fulfilling. Also, I knew or at least was acquainted with a couple of judges who were kind enough, once I started thinking about applying, to sit down with me and answer my questions about being a judge. And again, echoing some of the comments of Justice Ho, I began to see the shift in the makeup of the judiciary across the country. And I began to think that maybe my life experience and perspective, beyond my experience and skills as a lawyer, might also be as a value as a judge and in the administration of justice. Not only am I of Filipino heritage, but my husband is South American and my 2 children are Chinese Canadian. So ultimately, I decided that I wanted to be of service in a way that was different than I was able to in practice. And perhaps this would be a next fulfilling step for me in my career.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Justice Carrozza, could you please let us know your thoughts?
Yeah, I really echo my colleagues' remarks on public service. I think from my perspective, at least, the fact that I had a background in public service as a government lawyer, as a Crown attorney, lent itself to thinking, well, when I was in that role, what's the next step? You know, I could have a fulfilling career as a Crown lawyer, and it is a very fulfilling career. But I got to thinking about the next step would be the bench from the perspective of public service, because it really is one of the highest callings that you can sort of strive for as a lawyer in terms of serving the public, and that's ultimately who we keep in mind. I mean, that's our job. We're serving the public. So it was very natural for me as a government lawyer. What was not natural was becoming a government lawyer, because when I graduated in law school, my family was excited. Oh, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Well, that reality set in pretty quickly when I got 0 interviews for trying to article on Bay Street, 0 prospects of trying to hang up my own shingle and make money, because a lot of sole practitioners that are probably watching out there, or even people that have been trained in the Philippines that are trying to open up their shingle, know the reality of that. So I took the step to trying to get a job with the Department of Justice, and luckily for me, I was given that opportunity and it panned out. So it just went from that form of public service, which I absolutely loved, to thinking the next step is the bench. And I had, like my colleagues here, mentors that sort of steered me in that direction, because some of them became judges and said you'd probably like the job, and that's how it all worked out for me. And I think all 3 of us will agree that in the back of our mind, it is important to have a diverse bench, no question. And I think to a certain extent that probably drove all of us to get out there, and if we were given the opportunity, we would do it. I mean, yes, I'm Filipino. On the Court of Appeal, we have a number of racialized judges, including most recently Justice Jamal, but we've never had a woman racialized judge. So to look at Justice Ho and Justice Gajalian, and look at our own situation in Ontario, for example, and I can imagine what it's like in Alberta and Nova Scotia as well. These are historic appointments, and I think a lot of what drives us is to tell your audience, and the younger lawyers especially, it can be done. And we look forward to seeing more and more Filipinos on the bench.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I have so many follow-up questions, and I just want to say thank you for answering those. And I do have so many follow-up questions, which will have to wait. We have you all in a room. And I think Rochelle is next.
Yes, she is.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Justices, for your insight on the first question. And actually, that was Justice Cardoza, you kind of segue on my question, which is, what advice would you give to Filipino-Canadian law students or young lawyers such as me when you talk about the judiciary? So how about we start with Justice Gatchalian?
So just a few pieces of advice, I guess. This is not exhaustive. I think attending events like this, where you can hear from judges about their decisions to apply and what the work of a judge is like, is important. It's one way to think about whether you wish to become a judge in the future. If you're thinking about becoming a judge, then throughout your practice as a lawyer, you'll have to conduct yourself with the utmost integrity and collegiality. Your reputation is everything as a lawyer, and it will be as a judge as well. So protect your reputation and nourish it. There wasn't, I don't think, one area of practice or any template that makes the perfect applicant. Judges come from all kinds of practice backgrounds, as you can see just hearing from the 3 of us today. But you'll want, I think, to have a broad experience if you're thinking about becoming a judge in the future, beyond your work as a lawyer, which coincidentally I think will help you be a better and happier lawyer. And by broad experience, I mean not only doing excellent work as a lawyer, but also being involved in professional organizations, contributing to continuing education, volunteering in your community, stepping up for leadership positions. I know it sounds like a lot, especially when you're just starting out and just, managing to get the work done and learning your craft can seem overwhelming at times, but make sure to carve out from the very beginning some time to do some of these things. Because again, you want to be a happy lawyer. Happy lawyers make happy judges. And also do it because you want to use your education and skills to make a contribution. And just a final piece of advice, I guess, find good mentors along the way. Don't feel like you're alone. Lean on your peers, more senior members of the bar, and also look for mentorship opportunities that may be offered by the courts in your jurisdiction. So just a few pieces of advice.
Thank you, Justice Gatchalian. I turn the floor over to Justice Burnett.
I mean, that was terrific advice. I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add to that. I think that, what I always emphasize to young lawyers generally is that they need to be well. They need to look after themselves, and I always encourage them to sort of take stock of where they are and what it is that they want every so often, whether it be every 6 months or every year, because the reality is that as you go through your life, your priorities are going to change and you're going to have different time commitments that will pull you in different ways. And so you need to set your priorities at various times. When I started in private practice, of course, I was a young, law student out of school, and I had all sorts of time. As I got married and had my son, obviously my priorities changed. The things I could get involved in changed, my timing and my sense of balance. What meant balance to me changed at that point in time. And I think it's really important for people to remember that they need to reevaluate what that is every now and again, and not just continue to drive forward thinking, I must have, well, in my context, having worked in a big firm, I must have X number of billable hours. I must develop these clients. I must have this marketing plan, because that's just not realistic. And frankly, it's not going to make you a happy person. And I agree, you need to be a happy person to be a happy lawyer, to have a happy family, and then ultimately be a happy judge. But so I do encourage, I have a lot of discussions with young lawyers about wellness generally, and looking at what it is for balance, and appreciating that that's not easy to maintain in order to build a successful career and gain the skills they need to be successful lawyers. But I think that it's very important for people to take stock frequently as to what their goals are and what do they need to do to achieve them. And oftentimes, their life, the things that are important to them in their personal lives need to be part of that equation.
Thank you, Justice Burnett, Justice Ho, rather, and over to Justice Carroza.
I really can't add much to the excellent points that both of my colleagues have made. I'd only really emphasize what Justice Ho has said, and that is you have to sort of every so often make sure that you're stepping back and trying to ask yourself the question, am I sort of living a balanced life? I think that mental health is something that we're beginning to talk about in the legal profession. At least when I was in law school, that wasn't really something that anyone talked about. And when I started out early in my practice, but I think it's front and center now. Our own Chief Justice Strathy wrote a very, very remarkable paper just recently, and I would commend you to that if you can get your hands on it, about trying to get rid of this sort of warrior mentality that we have in the legal profession, especially in litigation. And I think that actually really happens in law school, because at least my experience in law school was, it was a very competitive atmosphere, especially, in certain times of the year. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed law school, but there was an element of competition in certain periods of time, and it could be very stressful. And I think that my advice to law students would be that you will have to learn that that is the environment sometimes, and think of strategies that will get you through that. But more importantly, you're not alone. In fact, the reality is that everyone is feeling that. So I would not at all think that you're the only one that is in that situation. And that is something that if I'd known then, I would have probably had ways to deal with it rather than have some rough spots between first and third year. So that's my advice to you, over and above everything else that you've been told, because I absolutely agree with my colleagues on each one of those things.
That's excellent. Thank you. This next question is on the path to the bench. And first of all, thank you to all three of you justices. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I know we're joined by lawyers and students from all walks of practice and life, some who may not have litigation experience at all, or who may have fallen into solicitor work. And for many of us, it may have crossed our minds, have we completely closed the door to a career on the bench down the line? So the next question is, for lawyers who have limited litigation experience or who wish to make a move into litigation one day in the future, what would your advice be? And what would your top tips be for transitioning into a career on the bench one day? Justice Ho, if we could start with you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I'd make a couple of observations. First of all, there are a number of members serving on the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench who do come from a solicitor background. They were not trial lawyers at all. And I can think of one who practiced tax law, another individual was corporate counsel for the Calgary City Police. Another was general counsel for an energy company. So there are definitely situations where those with what you might describe as a more solicitor type of practice have been appointed to the bench. So I wouldn't necessarily use that as to foreclose the possibility of applying for appointment. If an individual feels that they would like to get some more court experience, and perhaps you're in a situation where you can't necessarily just look for another job and move entirely, then I would really encourage perhaps considering some of the volunteer opportunities that might get a lawyer some court experience, whether it be here in Alberta, we have the Pro Bono Law Society, and there's a number of other organizations where lawyers help self-represented litigants in court, help them understand what the documents say and mean, and they may come in and present themselves or help present the self-represented litigant's case. And we know that they're volunteers. We appreciate that they're just dedicating their time, but at least it gives them an opportunity to get into court and address the bench and speak to matters. So that's something that someone might want to think about if they feel as though they need some additional court experience on top of the work that they're already doing as a solicitor.
Great tips. Thank you. Justice Gachalan, over to you.
Right. I agree with Justice Ho that appointments to the bench come from many different practice backgrounds. For example, I was a labor lawyer for 22 years, not a traditional litigator in that sense, but I was on my feet in arbitration hearings on a regular basis. Just not necessarily litigating in court, although I would do things like judicial reviews and that sort of thing. And I know a number of, for example, labor lawyers who've been appointed in the very recent past, including a recent appointment to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court Family Division, a labor lawyer from here in Halifax. Just a couple of other suggestions, though, if you're interested in finding out, getting more experience in litigation, or finding out if you like it. If you're a law student, definitely consider volunteering at your law school's legal clinic or legal clinics. For lawyers, particularly in their first 5 years of practice, there's an excellent trial advocacy course that you should look into. And think about getting involved with your local or national CBA civil litigation sections or the Advocacy Society.
Thank you. And Justice Carrozza.
Yeah. So let me start with the question about whether or not you're foreclosed from becoming a judge if you don't have what I would call a traditional litigation practice. I think that was what the question was sort of gearing at. My answer is, at least in Ontario, and I'm going to give you the Ontario perspective, it depends. And the reason why I say that is I've served on both trial courts, and I'll start with the provincial court. I think the reality is, save and except for a few exceptions, unless you're a Crown attorney or a defense lawyer, it's challenging to get appointed to the provincial court, only because and I'm not talking about the specialized branch of the provincial court, which is a family division. I'm talking about generally the Ontario Court of Justice. It's a criminal court. They do the majority of criminal cases in Ontario. So if you're a solicitor in Ontario and you're applying to the provincial court, they're going to take a close look at that application, and they're going to say, well, why would we appoint someone that exclusively does, for example, real estate, as opposed to a Crown attorney and a defense lawyer who are in and out. They're sometimes the former colleagues of the judges that are already on that court. But I say that there are exceptions, because there are judges of that court that did not practice criminal law. They did other areas of law that are just exceptional criminal, have turned out to be exceptional criminal judges. I think with the Superior Court, and the three of us are all what we would term as Section 96 Superior Court judges, I think it's much more open, and I absolutely, my experience in the Superior Court, I had colleagues that never stepped foot in the courtroom until they became a judge. I had colleagues that were litigators in all areas of law, such as labor, as Justice Kachalian pointed out, commercial litigators. And at least where I was, we were a generalist court, and we did everything. And it was wide open. I'll add this perspective from an appellate court perspective, and I think Justice Ho might have her own thoughts. I welcome the fact that I sit on a bench where we have people that were solicitors, people that were academics, people that were litigators, because I think that when it comes time to deliberating, if you only had 3 litigators sitting on a case or 3 academics, you're missing out. And I think that it is amazing to have the diversity that we have on our appellate court level. Makes for better decision making, I think. So that's my answer to whether or not it forecloses you. It depends. The issue about if you're not doing litigation right now, and you want to get into it, I think the tips that both of my colleagues have given you are bang on. I think that you can try to get on a roster, for example, that does pro bono work. But more importantly, there are organizations like this and RODA, the Round Table of Diversity Associations. We just ran a program dealing with trial skills. So that type of networking will, I think, help if you're not traditionally into litigation and you want to get into it, because that networking will put you in touch with a lawyer that might need, a second chair, for example, to deal with it. And that's how you get your in. Personally, that's how I got my in. I was articling in, a very small firm that did everything. And I realized early on, I hate this. I don't want to do real estate, and nothing against real estate. It just wasn't my cup of tea. So they introduced me to a criminal lawyer, and then all of a sudden I, just went to court with that person, and that's how I got into litigation. So those are my thoughts on that.
Great.
Thanks for those thoughts, Justice Carrozza. In fact, it dovetails pretty well into the next question that we have. Interestingly, is about experience. And as we know, lawyers can be practicing or non-practicing. And as we've talked over the past few years, Justice Carrozza, I know that your practice of law was largely from the Department of Justice, as you just mentioned. But I wanted to ask the other judges as well. Specifically, let's start with Justice Gatchalian. I'm wondering, did your practice of law before becoming a judge, and did it influence you? Did you practice it, and is it important to you in becoming a judge as a stepping stone, let's say? And if so, did your perspective change when you transitioned from being a practitioner into being a judge?
Right. So as I mentioned, I really did specialize in my practice right from articling. I graduated from the University of Toronto Law School and got a articling position in a unified labor law firm. And then that's what I did for 22 years, including when I moved back to Nova Scotia. So labor law is administrative law, and the laws of evidence are not as, the rules of evidence are not as strictly applied. Everything essentially goes to weight. We did see a lot of issues in arbitration hearings because of Weber. So, if it arises in the context of the collective agreement, then the arbitrator has exclusive jurisdiction. So we saw a lot of different issues. It did certainly help me when I transitioned to becoming a judge. But the reality, as Justice Carrozza mentioned, is that being a Section 96 judge is being a generalist. And so I am now doing everything under the sun, everything from probate, wills matters, to general litigation, to foreclosures. So mostly things that I never touched in my practice. But you realize that the skills that you develop as a lawyer, even if you've specialized, are all important and provide a basis for you to learn. And every file is different. And I hear that from senior judges as well, that even though they've been judges for many, many years, even decades, they can encounter on a regular basis an issue that they've never encountered before. And it's a process of figuring it out. On this topic, judges have excellent access to judicial education, both mandatory and optional. And when you first get appointed as a judge, you're given probably the best judicial education in the world by the National Judicial Institute, with support from the Canadian Judicial Council. And so the resources are all there. And I hope this is the case in other jurisdictions, but at least in my case, the bench that I'm a part of is extremely collegial. And so there's a lot of support on a daily basis in this steep learning curve. I hope that was responsive to your question.
Oh, then thank you for giving us a glimpse, a very interesting glimpse behind the curtain of the bench. Thank you, Justice Gatchalian. I want to turn that question over to Justice Carrozza, actually. What are your thoughts about, the practice of law, how it's, having a weight of an influence on your transition into being a judge?
I think the perspective that I would bring to that question is this. I was a criminal practitioner really all of my legal career, and there's so much pressure to specialize, right? I mean, you come out of law school, you article, and even if you're articling at a full service firm or wherever, you might be steered towards a direction to specialize. And if you find your niche in that, you'll basically you know, that'll be your career. So from my perspective, as a criminal, when you get to the bench, as I say, you know, other than the provincial court, which I did exclusively criminal, I was, to repeat my colleagues' remarks, it's a steep learning curve. Like, I mean, you know, I practiced 12 years in criminal law. I was a provincial court judge for 3, doing exclusively criminal, and all of a sudden I have to preside over a family case or a probate estates case. I mean, it was you know, stressful, but I have learned to love it. I think that is one of the privileges that we have as Superior Court judges, that each day, every day, you know, you get up, you go to work and do your job, but it could be a variety of things, and that is I think just such a gift for us, because it keeps things interesting, and you know, you don't become, I think, jaded as a result of what we're able to do. So, you know, be prepared. That's all I have to say. If you're specializing right now and you're thinking of going to the bench, that you're not going to necessarily be a judge in the area, at least in the superior courts, where you're practicing. So you're going to have to embrace it. And I think that we do have excellent education and collegiality that will get you through it. But, you know, be prepared. If you're going into this job thinking or applying, well, all I want to do is criminal law, well, that's not going to happen. I can tell you, as we all can, it's just not going to happen. And in other areas too, it's just not going to happen. We're generalists.
And finally, Justice Ho, last but not least, your thoughts.
I would say that certainly the skills that you gain as a lawyer, you can certainly apply those as a member of the bench. I mean, your writing, your analytical skills, your attention to detail, your ability to listen. I mean, that's absolutely critical, and it's a skill that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. That's important to develop. But you know, I echo my colleagues and agree 100%. I mean, it is a real privilege to go to work and be forced to learn and go and climb that steep learning curve, because everything that I'm working on now, I had almost zero experience with in my 23 years of private practice. Justice Carrozza will laugh at this, but my very first criminal matter that I had was dealt with a drug matter, and there was quite an experienced defense lawyer in front of me, and his client ended up pleading guilty. And he was very kind to say, now, Justice Ho, I know you're asking yourself the 3 questions. And he walked me through the Section 606 thing. But as he was going through and reciting the facts, I had to stop him, because I don't think he quite appreciated what a newbie he had. And so he's going through and he's saying, it's a standard dial-a-dope operation, and there were 8 balls. And right away I was like, stop. You need to explain to me what a dial-a-dope operation is. You need to explain to me what an 8-ball is. But those are the things that you just don't learn in private practice. And unless you're working in the criminal area of practice, it's not something you're necessarily going to learn before you're appointed to the bench. So, you know, as I say, the skills that you learn in private practice, you can certainly transfer those skills, but you need to be open to learning a whole lot more. And it's super fun, super exciting, and we are very privileged to be in this position and have that opportunity to learn new things every day.
That sounds great. So I'm going to ask the last question of the day. And again, you know, thanks for participating and agreeing to have this chat with us. As you know, judges can be subject to public scrutiny in and out of the court. And some say that it can be lonely to be a judge. Do you agree with that statement? And do you find that your social activities have been restricted since becoming a judge? Start with Justice Carrozza. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I had much of a social life before I became a judge, but because, you know, I when I was appointed, I had 3 small kids, and they're older now. But is it lonely to be a judge? Certainly, I think you have to be prepared that your social life will change. I mean, there's no question about that. in two respects. Number one, I think that there's situations where friends who or colleagues who are in the practice of law, you can't put, like, if I had put on my conflict list people that I could not hear cases of that were my friends, I would never be able to sit on anything. So what ends up happening is, the close friends, the ones that I really consider family, they're on my conflict list, but all the other ones who were friends, I hear their cases. And, if that's the case, then it's just a natural progression that we're not necessarily going to be socializing as much as we used to. So your social circle will definitely shrink. So that's a big thing. I'm not someone that was appointed necessarily to a small town, because that could be lonely, I think, if you're a judge that, and I know of some colleagues that are the only judge in town in some parts of Ontario, for example, and maybe they come from Toronto originally, and I have talked to them, and it is a very lonely experience, because the smaller the town, the more you'll run into people that you are judging, and it's a problem. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this wasn't necessarily true for me, but your social media, I think, activities would definitely change. I mean, I can only sort of look at Twitter and Instagram, and because my kids are on it, but I look at that, and I do see there are a lot of lawyers that are on Twitter, and that's, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important. You can't sort of ignore it. But when you become a judge, I think that things change a bit. You're not really identified necessarily just by Steve Carrozza, a lawyer. Now you're Steve Carrozza, the judge, and now you carry the court with you in that persona. So I would be very hesitant. I don't have a sort of a practice of tweeting. There are judges that do that, and I see in the United States. And I have a colleague at the Court of Appeal, that Justice Lawrence Austin. He's a very well-known judge, and I made fun of the fact that we were sworn in together, that he's got 11,000 followers. And I've got 3. So but he doesn't tweet, like, he just retweets things or things of that nature, and he's still got a lot of connections in the academia. But you'd have to be very careful, I think, if you were a heavy social media user as a lawyer. That's going to change if you become a judge. So keep that in mind, those two things. Your social life and your social media use will definitely change if you become a judge.
Great. Very interesting to hear that that change in your life. That sounds transformational. How about Justice Ho? Do you agree? Do you find it lonely to be a judge?
I mean, like Justice Carrozza, I'm not sure that it changed my social life much, because I was never really a big party person, I would say. And like many of you, probably, my number one priority and my tightest circle is my family. And you can't really cut yourself off from your family, even if you wanted to. So, I still my family, we still get together for regular Sunday family dinners. And apart from COVID, obviously, but prior to COVID, in counting nieces and nephews, there's 28 of us regularly for Sunday family dinner. So they are, no question, and continue to be my number one sort of circle of my social life. And then outside of that, absolutely, you do have to be a bit more mindful about who you continue to socialize with. Certainly friends who remain in private practice, I'm very careful about what I do and with them, because you need to be very careful about maintaining even just the perceptions that might be created, making sure that there's no perception of bias, or when making sure that I'm maintaining impartiality and that nothing otherwise could be suggested. And as Justice Cardoza said, I mean, we are, when you become a justice or a judge, you have to accept the fact that you, and I don't say this to sort of overblow our particular roles on each of our courts, but you do need to accept that you could be perceived as the face of your institution, and you are officially a representative of the administration of justice. And in swearing the oath to become a lawyer in Alberta, one of the lines is, "And in all things I will conduct myself truly and with integrity." And to me, that is something that I have always impressed upon young lawyers, that they need to think about that both in their practices and in their personal lives. And it is something that has always stayed with me in swearing that oath as a lawyer, that in all things I will conduct myself truly and with integrity. And so if I can live by that and live by sort of, even my father's golden rule of you treat others as you wish to be treated and all of those sorts of things, I personally don't feel as though I've been hampered that much, but I'm very mindful of the role that I now have, and what could be taken of my actions or my words.
Absolutely. Thank you. Justice Gatchalian.
I certainly think it has the potential to be a lonely job. You do, as my colleagues have said, have to be much more careful. And I think that means that as judges, we need to cultivate the very close relationships that we do have and be deliberate about those good, important relationships in our lives. I will say that I haven't met any lonely judges yet. Most, if not all, of the judges I now have the pleasure of working with, or I've had the pleasure of meeting, do seem to love what they do and seem to be quite happy, although they work very hard and carry a lot of responsibility. But they, like I said, have been very deliberate and careful in their social interactions, and keep their really close friends close. Yeah, that's what I would have to say.
Well, thank you very much. You've all given us some food for thought. I see the time, it's at 6:30, and we did say that we were going to do some Q&As, but we told the audience that we can send the questions by email to the justices, and if you'd like to respond to them, by all means. We just have actually 2 people who have submitted questions, so I think that should be okay. So if that's all right with all of you, then we can then close the program with respect to our dialogue with you. And I would just like to say thank you again for taking time to talk to us about your experiences and give us advice as to the path to the judiciary. It's been quite helpful. And so I would just like to say that FCLN will continue to do its job. And in June, we are having our AGM towards the end of the month. And for those of you who are on this webinar, if you'd like to apply to us to be part of the board, please do so. In July, we're doing an outreach, and we're going to be participating at the Philippine Festival in Mississauga, Ontario. And if I'm correct, it's the weekend of July 16. And all of you are welcome to come to the booth. If you want to put your cards in, by all means. If you want, to give us a break, for those of us who will be manning the booth, we would love that. But most importantly, we'd like to meet you and to talk to you. So on that note, I'd like to wish everyone, again, happy Filipino Heritage Month. There will be many, many celebrations that will be coming our way. And I'm sure we'll all be participating in that. We're very proud to be Canadians of Philippine ethnicity. And as Justice Ho said, it's all about food. I completely agree with you. I love food, as we all do. It is what binds us together. So good night, everyone. I wish everyone a good night. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Oh, Alicia left.
Alicia left.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
removed
no,
everybody, but I think
Okay.
Alicia left.
Yeah, I know.
Stop recording.
That's fine. That was great. Oh, yeah. Do we
That
stop
was such a
recording?
good event.